Hey y'all, my name is Cassie and I'm the creator of Pieces of Scrap, and in today's video we're going to be doing another amigurumi pattern review of free patterns on Instagram. And before I like to get started, I like to go over the criteria that I use to rate patterns. So number one is, would I use the pattern again? This really determines if I will come back to a pattern later to use for market prep reasons or for personal reasons, making something as a gift for a friend, anything like that. And that really has to do with if the pattern is easy to understand and is easy to go through again and again. And then number two, kind of tying back into number one a little bit, is can I understand the pattern easily? And this really comes down to if a pattern would be easy to understand if you're a beginner or an advanced crocheter or anything in between. Typically what I'm looking for in patterns like this are clear and detailed descriptions about how to do certain things that aren't typical in a crochet pattern. So for example, if the stitches aren't a single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, if it's a stitch outside of those stitches, like as in a more complicated stitch like a moss stitch or anything like that, a picot stitch, I would expect some sort of description or instruction about how to make that stitch. All of that makes a pattern much more easy to understand, and those are things that I'm looking for when I rate these patterns. And then finally, number three is, do I like the finished product? And everybody can understand where I'm coming from with that. So first off, I wanted to let everybody know that in this video, I don't have any suggestions from followers, and that's because my follower suggestions are kind of becoming a little slim. It's kind of harder to find things to pick from in my follower suggestions. So make sure you're following me on Instagram if you haven't already. My handle is in the description below, but you can also look me up. It's pieces_of_scrap at Instagram.com, and then just follow me over there. Send me any pattern, free patterns that you find that you want me to try out in future videos, so that I have some more to pick from, because right now I'm kind of running out of things that I want to make. I think the biggest thing is a lot of people send me things that are like really tiny patterns or really complicated patterns, or they're patterns that are specifically for acrylic yarn. And really what I'm looking for when I get pattern suggestions are like more plush yarn oriented stuff. And I also want patterns that, you know, are cute and people might want to purchase from me, things that are unique that I haven't seen before, stuff like that. So like for example, something that I might not want to test is a pattern that might be it might say that it's free on Instagram, but it's not actually. Like the patterns itself isn't on Instagram, it like links to somebody's blog. That is not what I'm looking for when I'm looking for these free patterns. I'm looking for a pattern that is on Instagram. All the slides of the instructions are on Instagram, and also something unique that we haven't seen before. That would be awesome too. Stuff like that. Maybe things that instead of like bee patterns, because like everybody has a bee pattern, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. I want some more unique things to pick from, and not necessarily acrylic yarn. So please send me your suggestions. I'm not going to turn any suggestions away. I am definitely going to try to get through all of the ones that I have, but I am really getting slim on suggestions. So make sure you follow me on Instagram and suggest patterns when you see them. So the first pattern that I'm reviewing for this video is this collaboration pattern by Stitched Creations and Lavender Crochet. The pattern is called like Free Crochet Duck Pattern or something like that, so I'm just going to call it Duckies and Hats. So the pattern comes with instructions on how to make a strawberry duck, a froggy duck, and then there's just a duck with like a sprout coming out of its head. I didn't even know that that was part of the pattern, so I just ended up opting for the strawberry and the froggy just because that is what is in the cover photo. Both of these work up in under an hour. The strawberry is a little more time, it's 54 minutes, and then the frog is 52 minutes, and so they're really close in time and everything. They are kind of sewing heavy. When I looked at the initial photos of the pattern, I was worried that the wings would have to be sewed on and there would just be a bunch of stuff that you sew on, but The wings are actually the only thing that is not no-sew. Everything else you have to sew onto the ducks. The first thing that I kind of stumbled on was actually having to do with those wings. So you create the wings in the front loops of row 9, and then when you come back to those stitches that you left unworked, it doesn't tell you to work directly in those stitches. However, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to, because the stitch count doesn't change, meaning you don't have to work in 3 additional stitches to get the correct stitch count. So that means you have to work into the back loop that you left open from the previous row when you made the wings. But there's no note of that in the pattern instructions that tells you make sure you work in the back loop. And there's also no instruction to, you know, mark that back loop either, so it might make that a little difficult to find later when you're trying to crochet in that spot. I know a lot of patterns that leave back loops open to work into them later usually tell you to mark those back loops so that you don't miss them. Next thing is kind of just like a pet peeve of mine, but the instructions on placing your eyes comes after you finish the body and you fastened off and stuffed it and everything. So if you were to do that, you would have to have safety glue and make sure that you safety glue the eyes into the body instead of just using the washers that come with the eyes to secure them like you normally would. And that's mostly a pet peeve of mine. I know some people prefer to do the safety eyes with hot glue method, but it's not a personal favorite of mine. It's kind of messy. Usually I see a lot of seepage onto the plushie itself of the, you know, the hot glue and everything. So I usually opt for putting the safety eyes on and then putting the washers on the back and just making sure they're really secure. The next note is that the feet placement instructions were extremely vague. It doesn't tell you like what row, across how many rows, anything like that. It just tells you to sew the feet on the bottom of the body. So I had to look at the cover photo to kind of determine how far forward the feet were sewed on, and that determined where I put them. So I think I put them on either side of row 2, row 3 is where I placed them, on the front half of the body instead of the back half. That's where I placed mine. I'm not sure if that's correct or if the pattern designer even cares where you place your feet, but typically I like to keep my patterns pretty consistent so that they don't like look wonky. If I have a bunch of them that I'm trying to sell at a market or something, I want them all to look almost identical so that, you know, people don't decide that one is ugly and then it never gets sold or something like that. So that is why I like having those instructions there, so I can keep my plushies consistent instead of having like inconsistent qualities about each of them. Next thing that I noticed was something I noticed like right away, was that the instructions for the stem of the strawberry aren't actually on the pattern page itself. It's in the description of the post of the pattern. So if you didn't look at that, you might finish your strawberry without the stem, and that might have looked a little weird, but maybe some people prefer their strawberries without stems on them. And then the last note that I had is for the froggy hat. You put safety eyes in the hat, which is completely cute and adorable. I like it a lot. However, there's no instructions on how to hide the backs of your safety eyes. So I ended up kind of improvising. What I ended up doing was I added another row of single crochets after I secured my safety eyes, and then I sewed those holes closed so you couldn't see the backs of the safety eyes. But there's no instructions in there on how to do that in the pattern itself. So if you were to follow the pattern without doing anything to hide those safety eyes, you would just see the backs of your safety eyes or the washers itself if you choose to use washers. So that would have been really weird. So I ended up just adding a row of single crochets and sewing it closed. So that's why mine looks like that instead of having safety hide backs on the back. So overall, I think the pattern's really cute. There's just some flaws that I think really need to be worked through. And I'm not sure if the pattern got tested or not. I know that it was a collaboration pattern, but I feel like the pattern designers themselves didn't really like think through a lot of the instructions or kind of work through the pattern enough times to, you know, really realize that there were some things missing that should be added. And that is why I would rate it a 3.5 stars out of 5. It's cute. I don't know if I would come back to it again because of all the things that I would have to kind of like improvise to make it look right. Next pattern that I reviewed is the Clover Cow by Bria Crochets. This is a pattern that comes with like a dairy cow, like spotted cow variation, and then you've got a Highland cow variation. And in my opinion, the Highland cow kind of looks like a guinea pig. I think it might just kind of be because of my color choices, but I think it's also just kind of like the shape and the fact that it's brown. Anyway, I think the cow came out super cute. The pattern is completely no-sew, which is always a plus. However, if you want like a little tail tassel like I have here, you have to add acrylic yarn, not premier yarn or chenille yarn, blanket yarn, whatever, so that it doesn't shed. You could always do it, but it's probably going to shed a lot, and at some point your tail's probably going to be bald. So I think that is why the pattern designer requested that you use worsted weight yarn, acrylic yarn, whatever, instead of using blanket yarn in that case. So each of these cows is worked up in under 40 minutes. It took me 38 minutes to make the dairy cow, and then it probably took a little less time to make the Highland cow because I didn't have to do the color changes as much. You work it from the face to the back, you chain the tail directly off of the back, you decrease all around until you get to the top of the middle of the back, and then you chain off, decrease one more time, and then you fasten off, add your tassel, and then you're done. So it's a pretty quick pattern, really easy to make. It makes a little cute cow. Really like how it turned out. The first thing that I noticed was row 9 was a little confusing. It says to work behind the ears, but it wasn't super obvious about if you're working like directly into the stitches that you created when you created the ears, or if you're just working around the ears and your ears are just supposed to stick out instead of being inside of the cow. I think maybe that's what they meant by around the ears, is you ignore the stitches that you created on the ear, you work into the stitches in front of the ear and behind the ear, like going past the ear, and just make sure it's facing the right way so it doesn't get lost. And then finally, the last thing, so not really a lot of notes on this pattern. The last thing is that initially on the first page of the pattern, it tells you how to do the color changes, and then when there are color changes for like spots and stuff like that, or for example, these little hairs that are on the front of this Highland cow that aren't there on the dairy cow, there are separate instructions for the Highland cow versus the spotted cow. That doesn't carry through to the second page of the pattern though, when you start doing these color changes for the spots, which gets a little tiny confusing when you're working on the Highland cow, because it's hard to determine what row you're supposed to be on because you're not doing a lot of the instructions that it tells you to do in those rows. So having a variation page might work a little better instead of having two separate versions of one row or whatever. It would cause less confusion if you were to have a variation page of the pattern that just tells you to do the same pattern just without the color changes. So yeah, I think it makes a couple of really cute cows and I really like how it turns out. I would give this pattern 4 stars out of 5. So next up we have the Mushroom Pop by Hook Crochet Co. And I made this mushroom popper guy in 4 different colors because I enjoyed making the pattern so much and I think these will be really popular at markets. So I made him in orange and yellow with a white body, made him in green body with blue cap, and he's so cute. And then I made a blue body with dark blue cap and purple spots. And then I also made the original red and white color, which is also very cute, and you can't go wrong with the OG mushroom boy. These little mushroom guys take 37 minutes to make, and they're super cute and straightforward. First thing that I got stuck on was the instruction to change to your body color. It would be better to tell your maker to do that in row 8 instead of having it on a separate page before row 9, so that when you do make your color change, you're doing it before row 8 ends. Because typically I think most people, when they change their color, they do it in like the last stitch of the row before you do your color change, and so that is why I would recommend it be on the previous page instead of the next page, because there is a page break there. The next thing that isn't like a huge deal, but it was a little weird to me, but the instruction on how to make a bobble stitch was on every single page of the pattern instructions, and it doesn't appear in every page of the pattern instructions to make a bobble stitch. It actually only appears on the last page of the pattern instructions, like where you're actually doing the rows. So you don't really need to know how to do a bobble stitch until then, so it's really weird that it tells you how to make a bobble stitch when you're just working on the mushroom cap up here. Like, you don't need to know it at that point. I also think that just having a general notes and abbreviations page with those stitch instructions would be better than having to, you know, just have bobble stitch instructions on every single page. Or if you want to really include those bobble stitch instructions and you don't want to have to list out all the other what those abbreviations mean, you could just put it on the page where the bobble stitch appears, and then that would leave you some space, and you could shift, you know, that color change instruction that I was talking about that is on the wrong page to the correct page instead of having it, you know, shifted around onto the wrong page. And then the last thing that I noticed was something that always gets me with these popper guys, but you're not supposed to stuff the cap on these. That is really integral to make sure that your cap retains the correct shape when it's flat like this. It doesn't tell you not to stuff the cap until you're like basically done and you're stuffing the body. So I would recommend that the do not stuff the cap instruction comes before you finish your cap decreases, like at this point, because then you would be like not panicking to make sure you get stuffing in there and have to end up taking it out when you see later in the pattern it says make sure you don't stuff the cap. So yeah, I really like these little mushroom boys. I actually like this pattern so much more than the chunky mushroom boy, like the OG chunky mushroom boy, just because I feel like people like this like poppable cap more, and it actually seems like smaller than those mushrooms and like a little cuter just because of the overall shape. And I also just love like a 3D cap instead of having, you know, like the simple almost looking flat and fake cap. I just love the little overhang of these guys, and it just looks like a little hat. It's so cute. So I definitely like these more than the chunky mushroom boy pattern by Chunky Crochet. So that is always something to write home about, is finding a pattern that you like more than another pattern that is really similar, and finding one that is easier and quicker to do. This one is probably not like significantly quicker to make, but it is definitely more entertaining to make just because of, you know, having to do like decreases and then increases, and, you know, having a lot more fun playing with this guy than you do with the Chunky Mushroom Boy. So that being said, I would give this little guy a 4 out of 5 stars. The next pattern that I tested is by Lee Crow and Stitch. It is the Valerie the V-Day Gumdrop, and it is kind of like it's interesting because when I first looked at the pattern, I didn't see these little things on the top of its head as bows, but they are actually bows. And then I kind of looked at it and thought of it as like a little, you know, kind of like monster looking thing, like a little, I don't know, monster. I don't know. It doesn't look like a gumdrop to me. So I really like how it's like a little sitting little teddy bear looking guy. Like he's, you know, nothing in particular, not like a specific kind of like anything really. He's just like a blobby monster guy. He kind of reminds me of like a Monsters Inc. monster. Like you have so many different variations of monsters, and that is what this one reminded me of. So that's what I was kind of going for when I made it. I wasn't expecting these to be bows at the top. I thought they were like maybe gills or fins or something like that. Something along those lines. So I was kind of taken aback when they turned out being bows in the pattern. This pattern took me 1 hour and 28 minutes to make. When you make the arms, they're like the first thing you make, and you single crochet them closed. And when you did that, I got really excited because I thought they would just be crocheted into the round. And you can imagine my disappointment when I figured out that you don't crochet them into the round, you sew them in later. So that was really disappointing. There is definitely room to just single crochet them into the round and save you a lot of time of sewing. And yeah, I just kind of wish you didn't have to sew them into the round. You don't see a lot of people who single crochet their arms closed and then still decide not to just single crocheted them into the round, especially since they're not like at a weird angle. Like it would be possible, very possible to do that, but it just wasn't in the cards, I guess. You also make the legs separately and sew them on separately as well. And those I can honestly tell you, I don't know how you would get that any other way, unless you kind of go about it in the way of like how you make a standing plushie, where you make one leg and then the other leg and then you like chain and attach to the second leg. Maybe something like that could be possible, but you would have to work from the bottom up instead of the up to the bottom, I think. So that would kind of rework the entire pattern if you would have to try to make that no-sew for that purpose. Anyway, the only other note I had was that on the assembly page, there's a lot of words there, and I get really turned off when I see an assembly page that has a lot of words and no photos at all, or no supplemental pages with like assembly instructions with pictures, because I'm a visual learner and I know that a lot of creative people are visual learners. So when you see a lot of words, you feel intimidated, and especially when there's a lot of words but there isn't a lot of specifics in those words. So when you get assembly instructions about where to put something, but it doesn't tell you like how many stitches in between or across which rows. I didn't get that in this pattern. Like, that wasn't an issue in this pattern. I just wish there were pictures to help you determine where things were, because although there were very specific instructions about where each piece was supposed to go and how many stitches were in between those things, it would have been also helpful to not have to flip to the cover page to figure out where those things were visually placed. So it would have been easier for me if there were some photos on that page. So overall, it made a really cute little monster guy, and I would give this pattern 4 stars out of 5. Next up, we have the Star Bunny by Lovely Crochet. So I will have to premise this with that this star is not a part of this pattern. I took the star from the Duckies and Hats pattern. It's just that leaf part of the strawberry, and I did that because I don't have any star buttons. Her pattern calls for you to sew on a button on the chest of the bunny, but I don't have anything like that, so I just ended up making a star. It was too big for her chest, so I just added it as like a little thing on her ears so that it's still kind of a star bunny. I also added a safety nose instead of embroidering or gluing on felt, because I think part of her pattern was you glue on felt for like the blush and the nose and mouth and stuff like that. That's something that I forgot to do, actually. I forgot to embroider the mouth. I just added a nose. That was all I did. Oops. The first thing that I encountered as a problem was that it doesn't tell you when to insert the safety eyes in the pattern itself. You have to go to her YouTube video associated with this tutorial to figure out where she places her eyes, and even then it's kind of incorrect. In the photo, her eyes are 6 stitches apart, but in the video she says to have the eyes 4 to 5 stitches apart, which makes quite a bit of a difference, to be honest. So I'm not sure why she says 4 or 5 and then ends up placing them 6 stitches apart. I know that that's kind of up to you. You don't have to follow the pattern designer's instructions about where you should place the eyes, but for consistency's sake, I think it would be, you know, it would be more advisable as a pattern designer that if you're placing your eyes 6 stitches apart in the photo, you should probably just say that they're 6 stitches apart instead of 4 to 5. That would make more sense, in my opinion. Anyway, if you don't want to watch her YouTube video and you want to know where the eyes are placed if you're working this pattern now, they're in between rows 10 and 11, and I placed mine 6 stitches apart, but she says 4 to 5. So up to you. Other than that, I was kind of sad that there were so many pieces involved in making this guy. You make the head, and then you make the ears, then you make the arms, and those are all separate pieces, and then you make the first leg, second leg, crochet attached to the first leg, and then crochet the body. And then after that you have to sew everything on, and as you can see, I'm still just getting the hang of sewing things on properly. I think the arms look a little wonky to me. They don't really look the same as they do in her photo, which I'm always really annoyed about. I know it's the first time going through a pattern like this pattern in particular, and so sometimes they come out a little wonky. I get a little impatient in the assembly stage, and that's, I think, part of why I really enjoy no-sew patterns, because it takes some of the finessing out of sewing things onto the body. And so yeah, that's kind of why I opt to do no-sew arms in almost every circumstance, and no-sew most things in almost every circumstance. So that being said, I still think the ears are super cute, and I don't know how else you would achieve that. Anyway, I would rate this pattern 3 stars out of 5. It's cute. There's just a lot of sewing, a lot of weird things in the pattern, like having to watch a YouTube video just to know where the eyes are placed. That was really kind of annoying and strange to me. Alright, the last pattern that I'm showing you in this video that I tested is this Chicken Mama pattern by Pixie Knots Crochet, and this pattern, as it says in the title, is a chicken mom. So she's got a little pouch down here where you stick her little chicks. So I fit 2 little chicks into her little hole down here. But anyway, the way this pattern has worked is you start from this inside part. It's like a really small round, and you work your way up to the top, and then kind of similar to the Mabel chicken pattern, you just sew the top shut, and then that creates this chicken shape. The little chicks are crocheted really similar to the mama chick. They're just worked from the bottom up, and then you sew them shut. So really, really easy, simple and easy. These little chicks are crocheted in 10 minutes, and then mama, it took me 47 minutes. So very quick and easy. I think this will be really popular. People really seem to like this chicken design, so having one that has like little babies in it, I can see this being really popular to like moms. Having a toy that is kind of interactive like this, that you could be like, oh mom, she hatched a chick, and you could even get like little eggs to stick the chicks in, or an egg. You could get an egg and put a chick in an egg, and then it would fit in there perfectly. So I thought that was really cute. The first thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of critiquing this pattern is that there's not instructions on how you're supposed to stuff the body. If I were writing the pattern, I would want to emphasize that you want to maybe make the chick first and make sure that the chick is inside of the little pocket that you create, so that when you're stuffing the body, you're not overstuffing that area, so that it's still easy to place a chick in there, and you're not like fighting the mama chicken body to put a chick inside of it. Next critique is that the comb, which she calls a crown in the pattern, could definitely be no-sew. It could just be crocheted directly into the body. So instead of creating a chain and then doing the stitches that she calls for you to do into that chain, you could just do those stitches directly into here. It would save you some time in sewing, and it would probably look a lot cuter. And then finally, there's no instructions on embroidering the beak, so you're just supposed to finish the pattern without embroidering the beak, and I'm sure you're not actually supposed to do that based on the fact that there is a beak on the finished photos. Anyway, I think these are really cute, and like I said earlier, I think these will be a huge hit at markets, and they work up really quickly, which is a surprise with how much extra work that goes into making one of these. So overall, I would give this pattern 4 stars out of 5. Anyway, that is all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a thumbs up and comment down below which of these patterns was your favorite and you want to try out for yourself. And if you want to suggest some patterns for me to review in future videos, make sure you follow me on Instagram, like I said earlier. I'm running kind of low on suggestions, so send me your suggestions and I will make sure that I get to them in the future video. And with that being said, if you like my content and want to see more in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell if you want to be notified every single time that I put out a new video. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!